Good morning, everyone. Lovely to see such a big crowd, especially as I know some of you are 3AMers. Very nice to have you here after the party. This is the craft day of AIDC. My name's Sandy George, and these three fine-looking gentlemen here are from the far end, Matt Bate, who lives here in Adelaide and made Shut Up Little Man, an audio adventure, which premiered at Sundance and also had a theatrical release in 25 US states, which you can't say happens much for Aussie docs. In the middle is Stephen Oliver, who divides his time between Sydney and Barcelona and made Chateau Chunder, a wine revolution, and in an AusDoc session a week or so ago in Sydney, the new head of Factor at ABC TV, Phil Craig, was referring to Chateau Chunder as though it was the epitome of his deepest commissioning desires. So, yeah, Stephen made that. And next to me is Gary Doust from Sydney, who made the 6-part series Next Stop Hollywood, which was on ABC. I'll tell you a little bit more about them as we proceed, because they have made a few other things as well. Today is an auspicious day, I think, because The Imposter opens in cinemas, thank you to Madman, and I feel like I've been waiting for this day for months, not because I haven't seen the film and have heard a lot about it and been dying to see it, but because I've seen it and I think it's thrilling and incredible, and I can't wait to see it again and make all my filmmaker and non-filmmaker friends go and see it. And I think one of the things about The Imposter is it really pushes the form of documentary in a way which is sort of typical of what's happening on the world stage, and that's really what we're going to be talking about today. You know, I think really exciting things are happening in the doco space in form, in style, in tone, and it would be really wrong to have a craft day without acknowledging it and celebrating it. So that's why we're here. In this session, Matt and Stephen and Gary are going to give us a little glimpse of the work that tickles their fancy and why it tickles their fancy. And that's principally work from overseas, but some Australian stuff. And I'll also be expecting them to tell us how they work within the system in a way that's acceptable to them. We all had a bit of a laugh during a Skype conversation a week or so ago when we were preparing for this session, because there was a bit of a fear that the title of this session, A New Face of Documentary, referred to them, and they're all quite modest chaps. So it was Stephen's suggestion that we actually subtitle it, If These Three Hopeless Fuckwits Can Work in Documentary in Australia, You Too Can. So keep that alternative session title in your minds. Let's start with Stephen, because he's clearly the most eloquent of the people up here. He's written and directed docos for many prestigious broadcasters on all manner of subjects, from polygamous pop stars to Islamic extremists to the odd heroic marsupial. He will tell you that his wife's from Barcelona and they fight about where they should live, which is why he lives there and in Sydney. But I reckon it's so he's got access to more broadcasters as a local person. As mentioned, he made Chateau Chunder, which screened on the ABC and the BBC, and his previous films include The Secret History of Eurovision and Skippy, Australia's First Superstar. He's going to tell us how this session came about to begin with, but over to you.
Thank you, Sandy. I don't know if I said hopeless fuckwits. Wasn't it hopeless muppets? That's a bit better.
Oh, Muppets.
Hopeless muppets. If we can somehow... Did I say fuckwits?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt.
So, yeah, we were quite concerned that we didn't want to be seen as kind of being the new faces of documentary. So we kind of wanted to frame this session more about, you know, where's documentary going? How do we keep it relevant? How do we maintain our audiences? And I'll have to just tell a little story about how the kind of session originated. I just had an idea, a kind of thought, actually, not even an idea. It hadn't even became an idea. It was a thought that maybe there aren't that many documentaries in Australia that are made that are kind of humorous, that use comedy or humour to get a message across. It's something I kind of tried to do I suppose, in Shadow Chunder, maybe in Skippy, Australia's first superstar, Phil Craig, who's here, encouraged that kind of tone. So I kind of scouted around for other documentaries that are kind of humorous, and I found it very difficult to actually find some. I think the use of humour and comedy in documentary is actually probably underutilised here in Australia, especially. I'm not quite sure why that is. I did have a conversation with an unnamed person of significance in the documentary industry in Australia a couple of weeks ago and asked that question to them over a glass of wine, and the response was unflattering, to say the least, that maybe there isn't enough talent in Australia to do that, which I strongly disagree with. I think that's just clearly not true. I just think sometimes, we haven't been encouraged to push through with some ideas. I think Matt's going to talk a bit about kind of pushing form in documentary making, but so the session started like that thought about humour and comedy in documentary, and it was going to be. I was talking to a good friend of mine, Jason Burrows, who owns a production company called Jungle Boys, about this, and he was really excited about the idea of talking about comedy in documentary, because Jungle Boys are a production company who have been very successful in making commercials, TV commercials, and comedy, television comedy, and branded content. They're kind of based themselves on being just ruthlessly successful in terms of financially successful, but they've been making really good content. They made a Moody Christmas last year, which is a brilliant comedy, kind of drama comedy series. And Jason's a good friend of mine. I've known him for years, but we suddenly started talking work instead of just chatting about, kids and football, because last year I made a what's called a kind of documentary commercial, a kind of a hybrid thing that a friend of mine who works in advertising just asked me to make it. He said, we've got this really great idea, but we really want it to look like a documentary, and you're a documentary maker. And I was kind of very reluctant. I was in the middle of shooting this series I'm working on at the moment. It's called Outback Coroner. It's very serious. It's a documentary. It's about death in the outback and stuff. But he was like, we've got this kind of jokey concept that we want you to do and make it feel like it's really real. So I kind of reluctantly agreed, but what it actually did, it actually was really successful. It won 5 Lions at the Cannes Advertising Awards in 2012 last year, and it's kind of created a whole sideline of a career for me in a way. It's kind of made me have this kind of commercial sideline to my documentaries. And Jungle Boys, being a production company that does commercials, they said, look, we'll sign you up as a director, and we'll kind of represent you to make commercials. So I thought I might just show that, because it's not because it's brilliant, but because it's kind of a way in which advertising and documentary have now kind of blended. So I'll talk a bit afterwards, so let's just play that.
Oh, and he's gone over the top of it off, and that's a great shot. Beautifully played. Way down. What a good shot.
It's gone for it. Man down there. No, there's not. That's it. Another 100 for Slater.
Not many grounds in the world where you feel the history of the game and those who have played and gone there before you. But Lords is one and the Sydney Cricket Ground is the other.
It's a beautiful outfield, amazing grass cover. You get the ball through the gap, it always goes for 4.
Just below 90 as he goes into the gap in the deep. He gets a good piece of it as well.
Sydney Cricket Ground is my favourite ground anywhere in the world, and always has been, always will be. And they had the Doug Walter stand, and now it's not there anymore, but there's a bar downstairs, and that's probably even better.
Glorious shot, a shot of a champion, that.
We have broken many Poms' hearts right here. These blades of grass have witnessed more Australian cricketing greatness than any other patch of grass on the planet.
300 Test cricket.
We took a plug of turf out of the surface of the SCG, and what you do with that grass is what's called vegetative propagation. Start with an area around 10 square metres, plant those pieces of grass in there, and then as they get bigger, plant some more and gradually plant some more. So there's really no limit to how much grass you can grow out of that piece of turf if you look after it correctly and put the time into it. Well, Shane, Here's a piece of the hollowed SCG turf. I think last time you were here was earlier this year, and you hit a slashing fall, would have went right across this piece of grass.
This is the grass of greatness, and that's why we feed it to these guys for dinner.
So this came from the SCG. The groundsman down there sent it up to us, and he gave us specific instructions about how we had to plant it out in one corner and then expand it out across the whole lot of the paddock to get it right to the stage of where we're at now, where we can graze the special sheep on it. That's what it's become. It's a perfect match for the grass at the SCG. I was a bit sceptical at first. I mean, we know that good grass grows good wool. We've been doing it for a long time, but we didn't really think that grass from the SCG could be that much better. So from these sheep, definitely enough suits for the whole Australian cricket team. It's a very special feeling because you know where the wool's come from. High performance sheep, high performance suits.
How does it feel to wear the first suit threaded with victory?
Feels great. I feel like a winner.
So that's just obviously an ad, basically. But it was, you know, I was given free rein to make it like a documentary, and it's kind of been this link to a new kind of sideline career that I was just talking about at Jungle Boys. And on the back of that, Jungle Boys, who I've spent a bit of time at talking to Jason, who runs it, have decided that they would like to branch out into making documentaries and factual stuff. So there is now a factual department headed by the brilliant Jen Peedham, and I think it's really exciting that there's a kind of new production company that's doing, that's wanting to push form, that's wanting to kind of be completely open to anything from comedy to branded content to commercials to documentary. And I think that's definitely where the industry is going. Like the traditional, we only do broadcast big documentaries is probably a difficult model nowadays, and you have to be open to new ideas and new ways of doing stuff. So Jungle Boys, you know, is very open to collaborators, to people coming in from the outside. It doesn't have to come from an in-house development department. The idea is that outside contributors can bring ideas and retain some kind of ownership of that idea and work collaboratively. And the other thing that happens there is because they represent directors, there's a real kind of, I was going to say collegiate, but it's a kind of collaborative environment where directors with different specialities kind of brainstorm other people's ideas, and it's kind of that idea of the collective. I know there's a few, you know, like the Blue Tongue Films Collective in Sydney that did Animal Kingdom. You know, individuals do their projects, but there's a kind of support system for ideas and for pushing things. So I'll just quickly talk about, briefly, just my background in terms of growing up in the UK. I feel like I completely fell in love with Australia, and even though I was in the UK until, I can't even remember how old, but I grew up there, obviously, and that's where I started my career there. But I then came to Australia and just completely fell in love with the country and the openness and the enthusiasm. And I think what I've tried to bring to a lot of my films, which mostly have been co-productions between Australia and the UK, is a kind of warmth and a kind of affection for Australia with a kind of British perspective, a kind of objectivity, perhaps. That's what I kind of have strived for. And it's really, I'm really kind of, I'm excited that Phil Craig, who's been my exec producer on 3 or 4 of my films from the UK, has now come over here, because I feel like we've developed this kind of shared passion for Australia, and that kind of telling Australian stories with a kind of sense of objectivity about where Australia's at in the world, but with a kind of inherent kind of affection, I think is works really well. And I think the Australian audiences and the international audience do respond to that. That's kind of what I did with Skippy, Australia's first superstar. That was the first kind of attempt at doing a kind of humorous documentary. I think we pushed some ideas, and I think overall the film worked really well and got great reviews in the UK and in Australia. You know, we did something silly like trying to interview Skippy. It came from an interview that we did with Sanjeev Bhaskar, who's a British Indian comic who did a kind of spoof for his kind of comedy show in the UK about Skipinder the Punjabi kangaroo. And when we interviewed him, he said, I can just imagine Skippy kicking back now with a glass of whiskey, talking about, you know, her heroics on screen back in the day. And that just kind of set an idea in motion that we'd try and track Skippy down and find out what it was like being kind of a hero in the 60s and 70s. So we kind of, after a huge amount of work, we found the stuffed kangaroo and kind of put kind of glasses and a glass of scotch and a cigar in the hand and kind of tried to kind of create this kind of diverting image of what Skippy would say now. And while those ideas, I think the film overall worked, but we kind of pushed those kind of slight comedy element so that people would. It was too obvious just to do the hokey pause thing all the time. You know, I just thought we needed to kind of go beyond that. But it was more, I think, in the tone, the kind of affectionate tone, but that we created that made that film work. So I think pushing form is really important. Using comedy, using humour is very important. Matt's going to talk a bit about pushing form. I did a little kind of research into documentaries that are amusing around the world, and it was quite hard. I got lots of kind of, I kind of downloaded a whole load of clips. You know, there's some really good moments in Nick Broomfield's documentaries, You Betcha, the Sarah Palin one. You know, even the trailer of that is amusing. Obviously, Michael Moore is doing, you know, his kind of polemic, humour-based documentaries. But one of the things that I came across, and I think is something to celebrate really, is going to be on the ABC. I think Phil mentioned it in his speech, and it's a combination of comedy, pushing form, and a serious actual look at world affairs, and that's the new Anna Bronowski film, Aim High in Creation, which is an attempt to make a film in the style of North Korean dictator Kim Jong Il. So I found that trailer, and I thought I'd just play that. It's like a celebration that, you know, we are making really good things in Australia. We are trying to push the boundaries in our own way. And let's just watch that clip and see what she's trying to do. It's pretty out there.
This is the story of a little boy who loved the cinema. His proud parents nurtured his talent and sent him to university in Malta, where he fell in love with Hong Kong action films, James Bond and Elizabeth Taylor. He grew up to be a great director. You know him as Kim Jong Il, the nuclear bomb-loving, citizen-oppressing dictator of North Korea, whose brazen slurs against the American war machine have earned him the world's ridicule, fear and contempt.
Why is everyone so fucking stupid?
I know him as a cinematic genius. Kim Jong-il is one of the most brilliant propagandists of our age. He managed to turn his dad, in the minds of his people, into a god through song and movies. He's produced 11,890 different genre films since 1964, celebrating North Korea's socialist utopia. Inspiring all he works with, the South Korean actress he kidnapped, the body doubles he directs for the world's cameras, and his captive audience of 24 million. Using film to manipulate an entire nation. And in 1987, he wrote a book on how to do it. I'm going to make a film in his style.
창조적 집단의 지휘자이고.
이거 제목이 원래 제목이 이렇지 않고.
어떤 작가가 달력에 나오는 그림을 그렸는데.
Actors are servants of the mastery of the country's development. What does that mean?
연기는 감독에게 달려 있다.
비와서 크게 만드는 게 이게 영화 창작에서 만드는 기본이다.
Aim high!
In creation!
It's genius.
So that's just madness, really. I mean, it tells a great story of, you know, North Korea in a completely different way. You know, he's a film buff, and she's trying to make a film in. It's a documentary of a film being made in the style of King Jong Il, and you know, so it's a great idea. So I'll wrap up now, but I suppose, you know, I've moved around a little bit in what I was saying, but the bottom line is there are definite opportunities to make really great, fun, engaging content that really has a message, that has information. You know, what I like to kind of describe, certainly my kind of style of making documentaries, is that you hide the broccoli under the chips. You know, maybe that's my parenting coming through, but you know, the audience has a great time and enjoys the film, but they accidentally learn something at the end. You know, and I
has
think
that been difficult to do? Are broadcasters resistant to these things, do you think? I mean, you've made a few now, so that obviously things are changing. But before that, was it difficult to?
I think conceptually they all love that idea. It's just whether they let you play it out, you know, to some extent. You know, Phil will admit we've had quite serious fights in at various stages, you know, because it's a creative process, and you have to play out what you think works and what they think will work for the audience. So there are discussions. I think generally, yes, if it works, if you can get it to work, then they accept that. So I'll just hand over now back to Sandy, but just to say that yes, there are new ways you can make documentaries. You know, it's blending in form with ads and commercials, and there's great stuff being made in Australia, and I think the future's actually quite rosy. That's the bottom line.
Beautiful, optimistic view from
There
Stephen.
you go.
We'll move on to Matt. As well as Shut Up Little Man, which I mentioned, Matt also made What the Future Sounded Like, Stunt Love and The Mystery of Flying Kicks, which premiered at South by Southwest and won Best Documentary Short at the Melbourne Film Festival in 2010. And Matt is co-director of Closer Productions, which is quite a prominent Adelaide production company. Matt, over to you.
Thank you. I was going to just talk briefly about what Sandy mentioned originally about how do you find a place making the sort of films you want to make on television, or just not just on television. I guess I've been concentrating on two areas, which is making almost specifically documentaries for the ABC Artscape, and working in featured documentaries. And I wanted to talk a bit about how I did that, how I do that. This is like an advert for Artscape, I must say, because I'm a huge fan of the slot, but also they sort of championed me from the very beginning. The first film I made was What the Future Sounded Like, which was a film about electronic music pioneers in the UK, about the guys that sort of did the Doctor Who soundtrack and that kind of thing. It was a film I was very passionate about making. I think I pitched it in a session, one of the early... You know, what was that thing called? Pitch, where you surrounded yourself with like 500... document. Oh, fucking, what a horrible experience that was. Anyway, it was it didn't get picked up, but it was picked up by the ABC. They championed it, and it was really a kind of, you know, testing ground for my style of filmmaking. I make sort of pop culture collage films, basically. And what I will say about Artscape and the commissioning editors there, Amanda Duthie and now Katrina Sedgwick, is that they allow a great deal of freedom. I mean, pretty much free reign to give yourself a directorial voice. They encourage that. And that film went on and went to South by Southwest and a million other festivals. It's playing in London. It was made in 2006, playing in London next week, I think. It's just a juggernaut that refuses to die. And it wasn't a format. It was, like I said, it's very experimental. It used found footage, no narrator, animation. You know, it was a real kind of sort of experimental sort of sound and collage film. I must say I love this sort of half-hour frame. I think people sort of dismiss this sort of arts television. I think it's producing some of the sort of best TV in Australia. I made another film called Stunt Love, which again was about a 1920s silent film director called J.P. McGowan. And it was made entirely from archival film, from photographs. Again, a complete kind of experiment, really. Which then played at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And I'm not saying this to big myself up. I'm saying that that allowance of experimentation, that kind of freedom, I think is something that I would like to see more of. I'm making a film at the moment. I'm making a film at the moment, from an initiative called The Hive, which was where they put a bunch. It's actually where Anna's film came out of. They put a bunch of artists in a room together, and just to see what would happen. So filmmakers, choreographers, photographers. So I'm making a film now for the ABC with a guy called Gideon Obarzanek, who's a choreographer. And we're doing a kind of weird, sort of hybrid doco drama dance film called I Want to Dance Better at Parties.
Good premise.
It's a very good premise. What? I Want to Dance Better at Parties?
Yeah.
I heard you were dancing last night at the party.
Yeah, some dad dancing.
So there's my big thing. So basically, I've sort of gravitated towards this artscape slot. I think I just continue to sort of knock on their door with these ideas, and being given free rein, I think, is really exciting. And it certainly led to the first feature film that I made called Shut Up Little Man, which I might just play a clip of, if that's all right.
It was this gaudy pink color, totally ramshackle hole of a place. The landlord, she turned after the lease was signed and she said, "One more thing. Next door neighbors, sometime little bit loud."
You've been screeching for an hour now. Stop it.
No, I haven't. You like
a piece of You dirty little man.
about a piece of
You've been smelling the
All you are is a piece of I smell like a human being. You smell like a f***ing dog.
Shut up, little man.
The first recording was in response to feeling intimidated, feeling frightened. But then it became entertaining. We became obsessed with it.
A friend of mine received a tape, and it said on it, "Old men fighting."
One scene mentioned something called "Shut Up, Little Man."
I must have, 7 or 8 hours of material.
It's hilarious.
How do you know about Raymond and Peter? You know, it just kind of spread like wildfire.
Shut up, little man. Shut up, little man. Shut up, little man. Sorry, darling. I get flagged off with it. You're a cheap little bitch. Shut up, little man.
So, thank you. Shut Up Little Man was made through an initiative called the Film Lab, which is South Australian Film Corporation initiative to give people like me their a chance at making their first feature film. And it was a very strange experience where we were given, it was a $350,000 production outcome, but 3 weeks of this very weird kind of like cult-like workshop thing with a guy called Stephen Cleary, where we sang 3-part Bach harmonies in the morning, and I sculpted Shut Up Man out of toilet paper rolls and a bit of string at one point. It was to try and make you think in some weird kind of, abstract way about the film. And again, importantly, to come back to the artscape spiel, it was total creative freedom, and the willingness on the part of the commissioners or the funders to fail, I guess, and to be experimental. With low budget, I think you should be experimental. You should be trying to push the form, push everything, and make a splash. that fund obviously isn't available to anyone, any of you guys, or anyone else, actually. It's completely dried up now. But my latest film is with Signature Dog, which I think has a similar kind of idea that that you are given. Would you say creative freedom? Obviously, it's creative freedom. Is it? Yeah. It's not broadcaster driven. That's right. I should say that about Shut Up Man. There was no market attachment to that. But I feel like you've given me free rein. That I have kind of complete. I can go as mad as I like. I'm making a film about a guy who's filmed his entire life. He's American as well, and that's another point. Is that the Shut Up Man and this film called Sam Klemke's Time Machine, both American stories, and the Australian content, I guess, is me, which is kind of radical, I guess. I don't think that's usually allowed in a broadcaster.
You're behind the scenes. You're not.
I mean that it's just me. As far as I am the filmmaker, it's my voice. The Australian content is my voice, as opposed to it being an Australian, having any Australian content. It doesn't, other than it's made by Australian filmmakers. But I think, what my point being that the creative freedom that these kind of little fractures in the kind of spectrum of funding kind of give you, I think are really important because it allows Australian filmmakers like Anna to make these kind of films, make these films that kind of make a splash on an international stage. And I think that is incredibly important. I was actually going to say that, you look at the sort of films that we're up against and we have to innovate, I think. We have to innovate or we die. And I was going to actually play the Imposter trailer, just as a sort of, because I only saw it recently and it's absolutely, I saw the film as well and it's absolutely amazing. But the trailer is so slick. It's like, it's messing with genre. It's a psychological thriller.
It's deliberately ambiguous, isn't it? As a trailer, it's deliberately trying to get people to go, is that just a feature film? Or no one would imagine that's a documentary.
That's right. You look at this film, it looks like...
The producer was talking about how they deliberately set it out to look like a thriller.
Yeah. Well, Simon Chin is now the king of documentary, obviously, unquestionably.
Sugar Man.
Yeah.
Man on Wire.
Play it. Actually, I'm really curious to know who has seen The Imposter in the room.
Oh,
yeah,
good.
Play the trailer.
It's a beautiful film. It's a very, very, very interesting film. Let's play the trailer and shut up.
This is what you're up against.
Yeah, be afraid. Be very afraid.
The birthday girl. Well, I was so beautiful. Yeah. And here is her brother, Nick.
We don't know what's happened to him. He gives you nightmares. I just gotta go get him and get him back here where he's safe. He had no idea what kind of person we were getting. He looked very different.
He disappeared without a trace. Tonight, a San Antonio boy is back home.
When a child is missing for years, either the child is dead or the child is not found.
There was just something wrong about it.
Something was being hidden, and I didn't know what that was.
The FBI is not taking this case lightly.
There was something going on. He couldn't speak English without an accent. Maybe he's not English.
We didn't need to prove who he was.
This is their family member. I mean, no one would be wrong about something like that.
Wait. What has he done?
This must be a very dangerous person.
A story so bizarre, it's hard to believe it's true.
I mean, seriously.
You in my home, you rascal, you. Man, when you're dead, you rascal.
horrible sound. So just to quickly wrap up, as I said, I think there are these little sort of, there are these funds and ways to make these kinds of films. So Signature Doc, Adelaide Film Festival are funding films, MIF Premiere Fund. I think ABC have got their, what's the emerging one at the moment called? Opening Shot, where seem to be sort of looking for kind of new voices and new ways of telling films.
Thank you, Matt. Let's move to Gary. Sadly, those of you who haven't seen Next Stop Hollywood, it disappeared off iView the day before yesterday. I just scraped in. Gary's also made Making Venus, Battle of the Brains, Embedded with Sheikh Halali, and he slept with the Sheikh. Actually, not slept with him, slept in his house.
Separate room.
And several Tropfest award-winning short docos, including Great White Hunters. Gary, over to you.
Thank you, Sandy. Steve initially invited me to talk, I think because my work has a lot of humorous aspects to it. And I guess I'm more been working in the observational documentary side of things. And I think the projects that I've been part of, and often I'm brought on as a gun for hire, weren't necessarily meant to be humorous or funny. And, the sort of humour in my work, it's not, here's a joke, laugh. It's really just a way of looking at life. And I think most of the characters probably don't know they're funny. And I think it's just really a way of shooting and recognising that and putting it into my work. And I think it... through making a few films and series like this, I've really come to appreciate the use of humour and the way it can really engage an audience, and even the way that you can sort of intercut humour and drama, and how both of those elements are really enhanced because of that. We're running out of time, so I might just to give you a sample of the stuff that I do, I might just screen my... just two clips from my films. One's Next Stop Hollywood, one's a short. But just to give you a sense of the way the observation and the humour and the drama kind of comes through. Thanks,
Number
Matt.
one.
Yes, thanks.
And if there's not 100 sharks within that stretch, I'd be pretty dumbfounded.
Glenn and I were trying to work out an easier way to bring in the bigger fish, and we sort of came up with the idea of a game chair.
Quite simple, just a plate bolted to the bottom of a normal pub chair, gimbal there for your rod, and not to be left out, the built-in stubby holder. Must have a stubby holder.
As far as paddling out, mate, that was... oh, way the world. Get me out there.
It's like anything, you're driving on the road, there's people that can't drive, but you don't worry about them. It's like the sharks, you're there, you try not to worry about them. Just keep your hands going, left, right, just paddle out. If you're out far enough for the bait to be effective, you sort of have a quick look around, make sure there's no fins sticking up, and then you put your hands back in, turn around and paddle back in. Yeah, keep your toes up out of the water. I do anyway, I don't know about these guys. I don't like to drag my feet too much.
I figured it can't be that dangerous. You're only out there for a couple of minutes. But the main problem was I can't surf. Just hanging onto the board, going through the surf was the main hassle.
There is times where he fell off and that was bloody crazy. I just laughed my head off.
Just as I started going over the next wave, I saw something jump just off to the side of me and sort of had to clench my bum cheeks for a few seconds, and then I looked at it again. It was a dolphin coming up out of the water. Apparently there's supposed to be no sharks where there's dolphins, but we soon proved that myth wrong.
I thought maybe I could slip a card to someone famous or say, get some good advice. Russell Crowe, we had a good talk. You might want to check the footage.
Russell, do you have any advice for Aussie actors? Russell Crowe, everyone. Nicole Kidman. Keith Urban. You've heard of them?
Actually, she gave me some money once, $2.5 grand for winning Best Actor at Tropfest. I was thinking that would be an in point, but instead everyone swamped around her like flies around a turd. I had no chance.
Meryl Streep's down there. Everyone's yelling at her.
Meryl Streep walked by, and I sort of whimpered. I don't even know what I said, but I'm pretty sure I sounded like a psycho or like I'd been broken, which is good. It worked well.
Miss Streep, what advice would you give me? I'm an actor. I don't know what I'm doing. Seriously, I'm an Aussie actor trying to make it. I'm not sure if I...
You're on the wrong side of the red...
I know. I would love to be on the other side.
You're not... Well, do you have any advice?
Learn your lines and show up on time.
As Meryl said, I'm on the wrong side of the rope here tonight. Didn't really need to be such a bitch, but, you know, that's all right. I guess she's right. Sorry.
So I guess, I don't feel like I'm doing anything innovative or anything that great documentary makers have been doing for years. I feel like just using really great characters and the importance of casting and good storytelling through observation can really make a great film. And I liked what Steve said before, hiding the broccoli under the chips. I mean, I think there really is a great opportunity to use those elements to be able to do that, and people not really understand, not really feel like they're being taught to. I know we're running out of time, so I've just, one thing that I thought I'd talk about as an example of something that I found really inspiring, and is a way of maybe telling stories and bringing together stories that aren't necessarily series. You can't make a series off these whole stories, but they're sort of been brought together and I think make a great show. What I want to talk about is there's a TV show called This American Life. It's based on a popular radio show in America, and if you haven't heard it, it's you can download the podcast, and it's just great. It's an hour-long documentary program, and they'll have maybe one story or three stories. It depends on the value of those, and they're loosely based on a theme. But the TV show they basically set out to try and make a TV show version of the radio show. If you don't mind, we might just quickly screen the trailer to give you a feel for it, and then I'll talk a bit more about it.
Here's a fact of life it doesn't take long to realize. Not everything is going to go the way you expect.
I'm going to hope that I don't ever fall in love, but I don't know what's going to happen.
People are making decisions that they're going to regret later.
I inch forward and decide I will pee on the floor, and no one will ever have to know.
Every day people try stuff nobody thinks they should try.
I want to be in Sundance. That's what I want. It's like saying I want to be Miss America at 63.
Every day, people who've been lying to themselves said that's it. Time to face the truth.
I've done heroin, I've done cocaine, I've done speed, I've had homosexual experiences. If everybody liked me, voted for me, I'd win.
And the rarest thing of all is to hear somebody say something and think, I never thought of it that way.
How much can you fall in love with a chicken? But a pig. I mean, think about a pig. What is there not to love about a pig?
People can surprise you. If you watch carefully, you do it all the time. That's our show. Unexpected stories that happen to be true.
It is real. It happened. I didn't dream this. It's true. I was there, and I have proof.
It's This American Life. I'm Ira Glass, coming only to Showtime.
So that's done 2 seasons. I think it was nominated for 8 Emmys and won 2. And just to give you a quick example of the type of stories they do, in the first episode, there's a story about a Brahmin bull called Chance, which has been on Letterman and it's quite famous, and they let it roam around the yard. And anyway, it dies, and the farmer has this opportunity to clone Chance, and they name him Second Chance. And so they're actually making a story about how they're treating this bull exactly the same as Chance. And as a shooting, the bull mauls him, and he's raced off to the hospital. And as he's sitting in the hospital, and I think he's had his scrotum ripped open, he's still adamant that he believes that it really is still Chance. And I mean, that's just a great little story, really well told. And I think that there's room in television today for those sorts of stories. Whether it's a show like This American Life, which I absolutely love, but just on the basis of well-told stories, great characters, and obviously put together well. I think that they're sort of the basis of those that I think audiences are gravitating to. So yeah, I might just I was going to screen something else, but I'll just mention it. Something that I found was quite a great little series that's just started. It's called Catfish, the TV show. It's based on Catfish, the feature documentary, which screened at Sundance. And what I like about it, and this is sort of thinking in the realms of television and how you can kind of evolve from making documentaries to turning it into a series, is that they've successfully managed to create a format from that film. And I mean, essentially, it's the film's about a guy called Neve who discovers online that there's this beautiful woman that's been emailing him, and he kind of follows the journey to the end to discover it's a 45-year-old woman. And the show basically has taken the idea of the feature doc, turned it into a format which doesn't really feel like a format. There's a lot of observation in there still, and believe it or not, every sort of outcome of the episodes are different and surprising and sometimes quite moving. And I really like the way they've been able to do that, and I guess sort of evolve into this sort of idea that maybe series are something that that a feature doc can evolve into. So check it out if you can. There's clips on YouTube. I think it's also screening on MTV at the moment. But I might just sort of stop there because I know we're pretty tight on time.
Shockingly, we've got less than 10 minutes left, and I'd love some of you to talk, not just us all up here. So has anyone got any questions about what's been said, or any shows that you'd like to recommend as great examples of the sort of thing we're talking about, loosening of form and style, etc.? Yes, in the front. Thank you.
Question about the American Life. Are they all humorous, those items? Or did you just choose a humorous one?
Well, that's the trailer, but no, they're not. They're not. And some are beautifully shot and some are observation. And the great thing about that format is it just allows for the spectrum of documentary storytelling.
Questions? Comments?
Just noticed, Steve and, I'm sorry, is it Mark?
Matt,
that you're observing a culture that's not yours. And I want you to just, is there anything you can just talk on that? You're talking about Australian stories, but and you're talking about American stories. And I think that's an interesting point, that you're observing a culture from the other side and finding the humour in it. Can you elaborate on that element of what you've talked about in documentary, the outsider's perspective? Finding the humour in that?
Yeah, I definitely think that there is always there's a huge potential to look at something from the outside and be kind of, have an objectivity at something. But So I mean, that's what I tried to do. Being kind of brought up in the UK, I do try to do that, and I think it's dangerous because laughing at the other is just not cool, and it often doesn't work, and it's kind of fraught with danger. So, you know, what I've tried to do is kind of embed myself in the other, being here, and kind of, you know, tell it from both sides, if you like, try and walk that balance. And I think that's a kind of continual, you know, I'm always striving to try and do that. I think it doesn't always work, but it's definitely a way that you can find humour is by showing people themselves in a way that they haven't seen. So that's clearly a way that you can kind of get a lot of comedy out of situations without having to force it in or, you know, write gags. It's a perspective rather than the kind of, you know, I don't kind of write silly gags or anything or jokes. It's more like a kind of overall tone, a kind of way of seeing. I'm not sure about the American side because I haven't really. It's quite interesting.
I didn't set out to make a sort of film about America as such. It was really much more pragmatic. I found that story and it just happened to be American, and there were just 2 in a row. Maybe there are more freaks out in America.
It's interesting I'd like to know why we don't make more co-productions with America. There's obviously a sensibility between Australia and the UK in terms of humour and attitude and kind of what's interesting to those audiences. But we don't do many American co-productions, do we? Has anyone here done just a purely Australian-American co-pro?
Yeah, that does sound weird, doesn't it? I've
why
never heard
is
of
that?
I have no idea. Right.
So there's a kind of structural reason, but I think it's probably deeper than that in terms of attitude and what the Yanks find funny and what we find funny is perhaps different.
You've all talked about techniques that you like to use in your own work, but are there sort of common documentary techniques which you kind of bulk at using in your own work that are used a lot in Australia?
They use it a lot in Australia. That's a tough one. I don't know. Not really.
I don't think you should ever bulk at anything. I think you should always see if it works. Make your film a meritocracy. If it deserves to be there, use it. You know, if it's in it, and if it doesn't, I would hate to think that I bulk at anything in advance. Actually, that's a good one point I didn't make that I was thinking about is the use of vox pops. I think in documentary, I like to use vox pops because I think the audience never goes to sleep when you're watching vox pops. Even though I remember having a discussion with Alan Urson when he was head of documentaries, he was quite, you know, anti the use of vox pops. To his credit, he said if they work, great, but generally they're the lowest form of art, you know. But I would argue that your vox pops always elicits a reaction, whether it's a kind of, you know, you're judging someone, you know, the audience is immediately kind of feeling empathy with that person. They could be that person. They're judging them on what they say, their accent, what they look like. You know, is it funny? Is it stupid? Do they agree? But it creates a reaction in the audience, and I think the use of vox pops can be really good. I mean, they often don't look particularly good, but you can make them look okay. And I think the content, you know, it never puts people to sleep when they're watching vox pops. It creates a comment, and I think therefore they can work really well in films. So I don't bulk at vox pops. Do you, Matt?
I don't love them.
There you go.
I'll just. I'll just quickly say that there is a lot of pressure to use voiceover in documentary. I've done it. It's not something I'm afraid of, but I'm proud to say that we were able to make Next Up Hollywood without a single line of voiceover, and I feel where possible, I'd much rather be hearing from the character. Talking about what's happening, how they're feeling, than some sort of disjointed voice of God. So, I mean, it's not something that I kind of poo-poo. I understand, and in particular, Steve's films, how important it is to be able to make those films work properly. But, you know, I do feel that there's a sort of reliance on voiceover, and there's no doubt that it's easier to make a series or a film with voiceover. I mean, you have to be very organised to be able to interview all of the talent on location when things are happening to get the full story. But, you know, I really feel for Next Stop Hollywood, it's a much better series because we were able to keep the voiceover out and just have the actors talk about their experiences directly.
Yeah.
There seems to be a little bit of a theme at the conference that broadcasters are moving away from history telling, but I wondered whether any of the four of you really have seen good examples of, witty, bold history telling that is contemporised.
I think it's a great question, actually. I was just, do you know the Seven Sins of England? That's one-off, UK one-off. It's an absolutely fantastic film that I was just talking to a broadcaster about a very similar idea in Australia, and which I can't be a part of, unfortunately, but I would love. I had to sort of cut myself free, and it was a horrible experience. But the conceit is that it's set in the Seven Sins of England being violence. These are the great things that England was founded on: violence, drinking, etc., etc. Now,
greed, gluttony.
Yeah. So the way it's told is it's basically a sort of lager lout on a Saturday night is the sort of main character, and he's out on the town getting boozy, and he will be out drinking with his mates. But then he turns to the camera and speaks this kind of poetic 19th century or 18th century piece of tract from a law or a speech that someone's given about violence or about alcohol or whatever it is. And so you have this kind of historical film told in a contemporary voice. And it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I don't know if it's out, but I had a conversation with someone yesterday that might be being done in Australia now. I don't know.
Yes,
it's in discussion.
It's in discussion. But there's a brilliant,
there's Drunk History as well, the Drunk History series.
Well, there's the Brian Hill's kind of. I mean, that's not really history, I guess. This was an historical film, but it's such a brilliant way into history. I think that's the sort of television I would, these funds that I was talking about sort of dry up, and I'd be sort of very much interested in making that kind of television, definitely.
And there is a Drunk History series where literally drunk people tell their historical stories, and because they're drunk, they're really kind of passionate about it. It's like kind of injecting a kind of, when you get drunk, you become a kind of more extreme version of yourself, I suppose. So if someone likes a historical story, ply them with booze, and then they kind of really like it or something. So apparently it works. I can't remember who's showing it, but do you know about Drunk History?
No, I'm not sure if that's legal though in Australia.
But Culloden did it years. Remember Culloden, that fantastic film about where it was kind of like was it 70s or something? It was made where it was the Battle of Culloden recreated on Super 8, and the soldiers would talk to you. It was the first time anyone had really done that on television.
Yeah.
I'm being asked to wrap, but I want to ask you all one quick thing. Well, I'm going to ask you and then you have to be quick. If you had a magic wand, is there sort of barriers in Australia that you think are blocking the bold and the innovative? What would you do with your little magic wand? Matt?
It grants us all lots more money to make films.
Right, yeah.
No, I would say innovate, evolve, or die.
Okay. Stephen?
Oh, God, good question. I mean, I think we should all join Phil Craig's mission to get loads more money to make documentaries.
Money, yes.
Yeah.
Not just money, it's an attitude thing, more important. I think we've got to be bolder. That's why I played The Imposter, because you look at that and think, fucking hell, man, that's what we're up against. I mean, seriously.
It feels big budget, doesn't it, though?
And it's very good filmmaking. It's a very clever film.
But it shouldn't always be about money, I don't think. I do think the Australian market is actually trying to give people a chance to make innovative stuff. I do think there is the possibility there to try different forms, and that there is a kind of appetite for it that should be encouraged. So, let people in positions of. I think our commissioning editors spend longer in their jobs here, I think, than in the UK. I think it's fair to say, and therefore that's got to be sometimes to an advantage. Like in the UK, they're so worried about their job that taking a risk could mean the end of their job or their career. Well, not their career necessarily, but there can be a fear there, perhaps. So we
Gary?
There's been a bit of talk at this conference about there being more one-off documentaries. I say this having just made a series, and believe me, I'm happy to do series as well. But I do think there's a lot of great stories out there that don't loan themselves to series. They're one-off documentaries. They might be half hour or an hour, and I'd really like to see more opportunities for those. For those to sort of exist in Australia, I think we have lost.
I think that's happening. I think we heard in this conference that there is still an appetite for one-offs.
Well, yeah, and I believe there's a push for that, which I think is, if that's true, that's fantastic.
It's a meritocracy. If that story only deserves an hour and will be best told, then make it an hour.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in the past, it's kind of been, well, that's a great story, but it's not a series, and so it kind of forced. Yes,
maybe we should quickly ask Phil about that slot. Are they one-offs or are they going to be a series?
Have we got a microphone anywhere?
Between 4 and 6 one-offs.
But there's a theme. There's a kind of theme of family.
Can you repeat that so the rest of the room hears it, please?
Yeah, I'll put out a press release next week, but we're asking for proposals for one-off films on the theme of family and the future of family. They can be in any style. The idea is that they'll work in prime time, but they can be made in any style. They can have reconstruction, they can have animation, they can have polemic, they can have anything you like.
So will you deliberately...
I'll try and choose a very wide range of voices, yes.
Yeah.
And styles.
That's great. That's fantastic.
I'm being dramatically wound up. So we've had a lot of advice. Gary said use people that don't know they're funny. Matt said crawl into little fractures in the Australian funding landscape, and Stephen said hide the broccoli under the chips. Please thank them very much for their advice and time.